I'm low-key faded, bro.
Highway.
Cowboys blood.
What's this guy supposed to be, the ultimate badass?
Hey, what's up, everybody? We're getting closer to the draft. We're just days away. I can't wait. It's Christmas in April, all right? Today, we're going to take a look at what I believe is the Cowboys throwing some chum in the water for what their real draft priorities are. This is serious. We're going into cat mode. Boom. All right, so what I'm talking about is, the draft priorities, right? Like we talk about draft needs, draft targets, this sort of thing, the 30 visits, you know what I mean? How many of a draft class actually have 30 visits? I think a lot of us kind of get carried away with mock drafts. You kind of fall into that trap where you're doing a mock draft and they're all 30 visit guys, and that's really rarely how the Cowboys ever draft. You may have a one-off draft class where there was like maybe 3 at the very most. But a lot of times it's like 1 to 2, even 1 year, that were no 30 visit guys as your opening draft pick for your first round. So, there's been some times where they're going kind of left field on us. They pivot and go another way. All right. That's why, like, I always take the 30 visits with a grain of salt. I look more at, you got to go back at the Combine, the Senior Bowl, private visits, those sorts of things, pro day visits, you know what I mean? I think those tend to carry a little bit more weight in a lot of cases. So what I'm talking about here is the Cowboys. A lot of fans, a lot of us, have gotten fixated on, we definitely need a running back, we definitely need a wide receiver, and that's kind of been it, right? A lot of fans are just getting super stuck on that idea. And then taking it a step further, some fans are getting stuck on a particular prospect. Tech McMillan, Genty, these guys. I honestly don't think that either one of these guys will be there at 12. Tech McMillan might be there, but he may not. I think it just takes one team to fall in love with a player, and so in that scenario. What are the Cowboys really looking at here? All right. The Cowboys, if you notice, have really added a lot of depth here at offensive line. And this is where I think the chum is coming into play. They just signed Akeem Adejini, offensive tackle. They signed Sadiq Charles here recently. They re-signed their own guy, Dakota Shepley, and they signed Robert Jones, right? And then you have Hoffman as well, who's still there, But if they believed in Hoffman, and if this new coaching staff, Connor Riley, believed in Hoffman, would they be adding these guys? You know what I mean? To me, these are just in case guys, roster guys. Like, we really want to get this offensive lineman, but we have these as just in case. These are like the just in case. Break the emergency fire fucking thing there with the axe and the hose, right? Break in case of emergency, right? That's what these signings are to me. And to me, I think they're really setting up to possibly take offensive line in the first round. Who would those offensive linemen be? Yesterday I was looking at a mock draft from Colin Cowherd or Colin Cowherd. And he had a very interesting scenario, and this is what really, got the sparks, kicking off here, as far as like, this could kind of go this way. So take a look at this. All right, so this is his mock draft. He has no trades in here. He just wanted to keep it simple, but he went Cam Ward, Hunter, Shador, ultimately went to the Giants, Abdul Carter, Mason Graham, Genty. I think all these make sense. The Jets. Tedero McMillan to the Panthers, that makes sense. The Panthers, they historically like tall receivers. Just a few years ago, they had Devin Funchess, and they had what was the other guy's name? the other tall receiver. He ended up being a bust as well. But, you know, they like these tall receivers. So that makes a lot of sense for the Panthers. Will Johnson to the Saints. You know, I think they still might be in business for a quarterback. Do they go left field and go there with Will Johnson, maybe even Jackson Dart right there? You know, Jalen Walker. Now, here we go. If you notice, Will Campbell has not been drafted yet in this mock draft, but Kelvin Banks went one pick before us to the 49ers. You know what I mean? I think the Cowboys have set up their depth here to where they're coveting on offensive linemen to really solidify that offensive line. You know what I mean? So to me, I'm preparing myself for the Cowboys announcing possibly an offensive lineman here. You know, I think the two players to keep in mind would be Kelvin Banks and Will Campbell. All right. In this mock draft here from Colin Cowherd, you know, they have Will Campbell falling here. Could that happen? You know what I mean? He's listed as a tackle, but of course, you know, the thing about him, you know, he has, you know, a little bit of the shorter arms, right? I think if you were to be there at 12, I think the Cowboys would take him and plug him in at right guard, and you have a badass offensive line. You would expect Tyler Guyton to improve in year 2. They're not going to move him. The Cowboys, they give their players, especially their draft picks, chance after chance after chance. So they're not going to abandon that Tyler Guyton pick after year 1. You know what I mean? I mean, look at Mozzie. They've been giving him chances. You know, and then you go to the history of the Cowboys. They give a lot of their players a lot of chances. So Guyton is going to be there. You know what I mean? Terrence Steele is still there, right tackle. And he had an off season, terrible season, right? But right guard is still a big hole, you know what I mean? And if you want, and if Schottenheimer is about setting the tone and getting this running game going, that first pick could be a callback to when Garrett got his first pick in Tyron Smith. We saw the Tyron Smith retirement. Everybody was in their fields and everything like, oh yeah, man, that was the first pick. Tyron Smith really set the tone. We started rebuilding an offensive line. This could be what they're actually looking at in the first round. Offensive line. Kelvin Banks, he's a tackle, but you could easily plug him in at right guard. You know what I mean? These guys are professionals. They're open to moving. And he's a mauler. I think he would be better suited for the Cowboys here interior. But Will Campbell would be a great pick there. So the Cowboys, I think, you know, with the much depth that they've added here on the offensive line could be the real target. Okay, now if we get wiped out with, let's say, Will Campbell and Banks are gone, then I think they go down their board. You know what I mean? And it could either be wide receiver or running back. You know what I mean? Which group has the better blue chip? Who do they have rated higher? This is where Mel Kiper could be thinking that it's Omarion Hampton, and it very well could be. You know, the Cowboys traditionally have had the triplets, right? You know, we have the original triplets that cannot be replicated, but they don't have that right now. You know, the Cowboys, the business side is about marketing. So we're going to draft Omarion Hampton. We're going to revive the triplets with Dak, Lamb, and Omarion Hampton. So that could be the combination. You know what I mean? So if they get wiped out on old linemen, the first pick could be Omarion Hampton. All right. Now, the other combination could be that they do O lineman, right? If one of those guys is there, and then they go wide receiver in the second round because running back stretches a little further. So it could be O-line, wide receiver. Who would be there available? You know, at 44, would Burden fall that far back? Jaden Higgins definitely should be there. He would be a great complement to CeeDee Lamb. Higgins and Lamb would be comparable to like a Chase and, you know, Higgins. So there's something to it, man. I think they're throwing chum in the water here. And then of course, if they did O-line, wide receiver, running back in the third, who would be your third round running backs? All right, look at that. You know, the first three picks could easily be all offensive picks. I think you got to rebuild it. You got to fortify it. You know, if the Cowboys want to set the tone here with the running game, all linemen still needs to be addressed. You know, but they definitely have thrown some chum in here. They have a lot of backups just in case we get wiped out. Well, we have these other guys here that'll compete, which hopefully is not the case, man. But I think these are the three areas that they really have high on their draft priorities. You could go any combination in the first 3 rounds of O-line, wide receiver, and running back. You know what I mean? You could go running back in the first, O-line in the second. You could go running back in the third. At the end of the day, if they don't go running back in the first, if it's not Marion Hampton, and they don't trade down and take Hampton or trade down and get Caleb Johnson or somebody like this, I think the third round is the sweet spot for a running back. It's those first 2 rounds where I think they're kind of popping smoke right now and throwing chum in the water, where, you know, they're letting the fans kind of create this smoke and mirrors, like, oh man, everybody's looking at Matthew Golden and these guys. Oh, that's got to be the pick. The pick's got to be Matthew Golden. It's got to be. And then when the card comes in, depending on what old lineman is still there, it could be an old lineman, you know, the bread and butter. Will McClay, we believe he's safe, but he's got to recapture that draft magic, man. It's been a while, dude. You know, get you the premier O lineman, or go a safe pick like an Emeka Egbuka. I think he's probably the safest of the wide receivers. You know, he's pro ready. You know what I mean? And he can do it all. He's like a Swiss knife. So, man, this draft is just very interesting. I think it could go any way, man. But guys, let me know what you guys think. What do you think the first 3 rounds? What are the combinations you see? But I see old lineman as possibly the real first round desire for these guys, right? We'll see for the next one. We got the final mock draft Monday coming up here. It's going to be a banger. And then we'll close it out on Tuesday with the Frisco report. But that's all I have today, guys. See you for the next one. Peace.
Yeah, old school, baby.